Hello and welcome to Fraud Fact Friday. I can't believe it's been a week, but it is Friday again, June 12th, and we are live. I'm streaming from Germany, and I have Leah Wietholter with me here today. Hi, Leah. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great.
Where are you streaming from?
I'm streaming from Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay. And thanks for taking the time to join today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Looking forward to talking about, the investigation game. It's kind of a twofold type of thing we're going to be looking at there, but also forensic accounting. Your LinkedIn tagline, which we'll get into a little bit more later, is CEO. You're the CEO of Workman Forensics, forensic accounting and fraud investigation firm. Data sleuth, forensic accountant, certified fraud examiner, private investigator, podcast host, also going to get into that. And NASBA CPE sounds like I just recited the alphabet a little bit, but
Yeah.
also a very important role. So thanks for joining again.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
I always start the show. You had mentioned before you wanted to send out the link to your network. I don't know if you had the chance to do that.
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
All good.
perfect. So I like to start the show with an icebreaker so that the audience gets to know my guests a little bit better, gets to know, a little bit more beyond what we're going to be talking about, the investigation game. And so it's 5 either-or questions, and they have to be answered. I've seen you as a participant in some of these live things, so I think what's coming. But 5 either-or questions in 30 seconds. And if you're ready to go, then I would start my clock and we can get into the icebreaker. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Here we go. Get my clock ready. Relaxing vacations or action vacations?
Let's go with relaxing right now.
Card game or board game?
Card game.
Netflix series or a good book?
Netflix.
Morning person or night owl?
Night owl.
Who's the better investigator, Sherlock Holmes or Hercule Poirot? Do you know
I
that?
have to go with Sherlock.
Okay.
Those are good.
We're going to talk a little bit more about Sherlock here as we go along. But anyways, thanks for playing that little icebreaker round. I wanted to follow up on the card game. What's the card game you would choose? Anything in particular?
Oh gosh. I mean, we have several. My husband and I a couple years ago started doing like tabletop gaming and joining a tabletop game community. And so to rope him in, I wanted to play games, and he's a huge Star Wars fan. And so we started playing a game called Star Wars Destiny, and it's a collectible card game, and they have tournaments and all of that. It's now they stopped making it this year, and he's really sad, but probably Star Wars Destiny.
Okay. Cool. So we're going to get into the Sherlock Holmes thing here in a minute, but I want to give you the chance to introduce yourself now and tell the viewers about your background and how you got involved in the fraud fighting space.
Sure. Yeah. I wanted to be an investigator since I was at least 12 years old. And so everything that I did, whether in high school or college, I would always start looking for like what types of jobs would allow me to do that. And so when I was I went to school at Oral Roberts University here in Tulsa. And when I was there, I had an opportunity to apply for an FBI internship. It was their honors internship where I spent 10 weeks on the East Coast and, just learning everything about FBI. I mean, it was a really cool experience. So then I had the opportunity to come back to Tulsa and actually work at what they call the resident agency, which is the office here in Tulsa. It's got about 40, or when I was there, it was about 40 people. And so I worked, being an accounting major, I got to work under a forensic accountant for 2 years. So I worked on white collar investigations, a Ponzi scheme, mortgage fraud. I testified before grand jury on some fraud against the government. I got to do search warrants. I mean, it was just like the coolest job.
Yeah.
And so then after that experience, I looked at staying with the Bureau, but I was only like 23 years old. So I decided that I would go and get experience that all good accountants are supposed to get and go work in public accounting. So I chose tax. That seemed like a handy skill to have throughout life. And so I started prepping tax returns. And after I'd been there a few months, I had mentioned to them that I thought that forensic accounting could be offered in the private sector and as part of a public accounting firm. And so cases ended up coming in, and there was a certified fraud examiner on staff that was a manager. And so they let us start working these cases and ultimately created a division. Working in public accounting, there's always this, especially a tax firm, there's busy season twice a year. With forensic accounting, now I can kind of predict when busy seasons are. But back then, I couldn't. And so I ended up working like this year-round busy season because you're just dependent on whatever case comes in. So after doing that for about 2.5 years, then I started Workman Forensics, and there's nothing special. I mean, it is special to me, but there's no creativity involved with the name Workman Forensics. It's my maiden name, and I don't have any brothers. And so the Workman name stopped with my dad. So I just named my firm Workman Forensics. And it will be 10 years in November. So here we are.
Cool. Very nice. So quickly, hello, Melly. Thank you for joining from Chicago and for commenting. Anyone else, feel free to comment where you're viewing from. Let us know if you have any questions. But I'm going to start with my questions. That's the cool part about being the host. I get to ask the questions first. And I'd like to start with podcasting because, it's something that I've also dabbled in as well. Had a podcast started in 2018, things like that. So your podcast, The Investigation Game, the tagline, how do you become a modern day Sherlock Holmes? Can you describe the scope and the purpose of the podcast?
Yeah, so this podcast was really created to help people, whether professionals or non-professionals, just learn what is the way to think about investigations, especially in the modern day. And one of my favorite Sherlock Holmes quotes is, data, 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 I cannot build bricks without clay. And I just think it's really fascinating because we're talking about books that were written in the 1800s, and he's talking about, data and what did data look like then. And essentially, in data now, we think of computers and ones and zeros, but just the fact of gathering best evidence to create, to determine what happened. And in the fraud space, a lot of times that's to determine the loss, which will then lead towards, next steps. And so I really wanted to be able to talk about all things investigation. And in a few weeks, we're actually having a retired homicide detective who was on First 48. He's going to be talking about investigations, because I think that if we know how to investigate something and we kind of understand the investigative process and what best evidence looks like, we can apply those skills to any type of investigation. And to me, investigations are really solving problems or solving, we like to think solving a mystery, but it's really just solving the problem of our client, if you're in the private space, or of the victim.
Mm-hmm. And so what would you say has been a big personal takeaway from the podcast as a podcast host? Now that you're 30 episodes in, is there, not to discount any specific guest you had, but maybe you had a favorite guest or an eye-opening experience with one of your guests?
Gosh, I really have liked all of the guests. I'm definitely particular, because we have people ask us if they can be on the podcast, and I'm always pushing towards, the goal of this podcast is to equip people with tools to solve problems. So if that's not the focus, then we're not going to have them on there. And so I think that niche has really helped me find those people that they have done this for a living. They're not just talking about it from a conceptual standpoint, but actually have some action plans. And probably one of the most challenging conversations I've had, well, a couple come to mind, but one is with Justin Seitz of Hunchley. And that episode, actually, we had to split that up into 2 episodes. But that was just really challenging for me as an investigator, because I had not even thought about online investigations the way that he explains it. And I mean, he's so legit. So that one was awesome. But all of our guests have been great. And as a host, I think that, I mean, I've just gotten more comfortable. I started the podcast kicking and screaming. So I did not want to start a podcast, but I just realized that, you see online different blogs and stuff that'll say you really do have something to say, and there are people who want to listen. And I think that I found that is true. And I'm glad that I took the step to start the podcast, and that my team shoved me into this.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, same experience on my end. You kind of got to push yourself to get started, but once you've started, you kind of start to see the value, the content that you're bringing is certainly helpful. So last question on Sherlock. What does the modern day Sherlock Holmes briefcase or toolkit look like? It's probably changed a lot over the years, over recent years even. But can you name a few things that Sherlock Holmes, the modern day Sherlock Holmes, shouldn't leave home without?
Yeah, I think in the fraud space, we're definitely talking about things like Excel and understanding how to use Excel is really powerful, even though it's it's just Excel. It's really powerful, and the things that you can create macros and automations for. And then, of course, Google Sheets and all of the Google, the big data Google stuff, all of that. I mean, that's just becoming more and more powerful. So, and you can write scripts in Google, which is just awesome. Google Sheets. And then we use something called IDEA and the data analytics, and that's really helpful too. There's certain things that we prefer to do in IDEA over Excel, but because we can automate that too. And I really think too, even though this isn't an actual tool, I think it's a mindset of walking into cases thinking, I want my analyst in their toolkit to think, okay, I have all these tools and this client's telling me all of their issues and things that they're concerned about. Where do the best data sources lie that I can then use my tools? Because your tool is only as good as the data that you're putting into it.
Right. So the investigation game is not only the name of your podcast, you actually created a game. So gamification for forensic accounting for investigators. What are some of the main learning objectives of this game, and what makes it fun? I mean, I'm assuming it's fun. It's a game.
It is really fun. And like I said, my husband and I are into tabletop games. And so I wanted to have that similar experience while giving participants the opportunity to have a hands-on. A lot of investigators may never work a multi-million-dollar embezzlement case. And so this gives them the opportunity to actually hands-on work through that, but as a card game. And now we have a digital version as well. We were kind of forced to do that a couple months ago. But the game focuses on the standard of objectivity that we as, whether somebody's a certified public accountant or a certified fraud examiner, that we want to be objective in our investigations. And that's difficult to do, especially when you're really close to the victim is your client. That's just, you've got this relationship. And so how do you do that? And so what we emphasize in the presentation component is the investigative process, that the investigative process in a fraud case really involves research. It involves your best evidence, data analysis. Then we talk about, at which point, don't forget, you can potentially go interview the subject and get more information that way. We really emphasize that as an objective person, we're not just going to take this evidence that we have and say, well, we know this much, but there's all these other things out to the side. Let's just throw those at the wall and see if they stick too. But really being objective, okay, what is it that we actually know that we can prove based on best evidence? And let's move forward with that. And then as part of the game, we also talk about, you can have all of these findings, but if you can't communicate those findings, it's really, what is everybody paying you for, essentially? We have to create value with those findings. And how do we do that? So we go over just some tips, and then the game reinforces how you organize your information and your findings.
And if I understood it correctly, you can earn CPE credits by completing the game or going through the course?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We are, you said it at the beginning, the
Right.
NASBA sponsor. So we are a NASBA sponsor. So it qualifies for 2 hours, or it's recommended for 2 hours of behavioral ethics.
Okay. Very cool. I hope to someday be able to take part in one of the games.
I know.
But yeah, we'll organize that offline. So moving on to forensic accounting, I saw in one of your videos, I do a little investigation myself on my potential guests, and I saw in one of your videos that you talk about what forensic accounting is not. And it's not like watching CSI. You don't just type in magic codes and find answers. That's how you put it. So how would you sum up the field of forensic accounting?
So forensic accounting really, like, just on a definition level, it's just accounting that can be used in a court of law. A lot of times people think, oh, it's forensic, so it has to be CSI. No, it's just accounting that can be used in a court of law. So that's kind of boring. But essentially, in my experience and viewpoint, whether it's an embezzlement case, divorce, partnership dispute, some sort of fraud, even a damages calculation, forensic accounting is really identifying where did money come from, where did money go, and we're going to base that on best evidence or data. Like I keep talking about, I feel like a broken record this morning, but that we're going to focus that on. We're going to focus on data to tell us what happened, and from that, sometimes we may have to make estimates or give opinions on what would have happened. But really, forensic accounting, the majority of our work is taking data and saying, where did money come from? Where did it go? And the best way I like to explain that is that we're dealing with a Venn diagram. We're going to compare what happened to what should have happened and find the difference.
Yeah. So now I'm going to really give you the opportunity to talk about this data sleuth thing, which I mentioned in the beginning. You have it in your tagline, data sleuth. I've always wanted to have an idea that's good enough to trademark, just hasn't happened yet. But you've trademarked, I believe, data sleuth, the term. So tell me about some of the details behind this concept.
Sure. So on my team, I have CPAs. I'm a fraud examiner. I'm a PI. I've got another PI. I actually have a geologist who is a brilliant data analyst. So we all come from very different backgrounds. And a few years ago, I realized that whenever we were talking about forensic accounting, sometimes there was just this disconnect between the traditional investigations and maybe more, let's dig through paper and let's go do a whole bunch of interviews. And I'm not saying that those things aren't important, but that's not how we start our cases. We start our cases with data. And so I was trying to think of something that would differentiate, yes, we do this concept of forensic accounting, but more specifically, we're not even, most of the time, we're not even looking at accounting records unless we're wanting to see the accounting records give us the context and the story behind what was happening. And a lot of times it provides us with evidence of intent. But the actual loss comes from, bank statements, credit card statements, payroll reports. So that's usually what we're focused on. So there was just often this disconnect between, well, don't you want access to all of this accounting stuff? And we'd say, no, we want your bank statements and your credit card statements. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to be more specific about what we were doing. And so one day I remember where I was driving on the highway in Tulsa, and I just had this thought of like, data sleuth. That's cool. So then we started just kind of hashing it out, and it has not been used in this way, and it's not really even that common. And so once I saw that, then I hired a intellectual property attorney and started working on trademarking the phrase, and it's now trademarked. It was kind of a long process, just waiting, because everything, my attorney would get to it quickly, but then we're waiting on the because it has to go through like a federal office.
Right.
So getting through that took a little while, but we're done. So
very cool. So final question here on I mean, it's not the final question because the question just came in about forensic accounting, but for those interested in getting involved in forensic accounting, what would be the fastest route? I mean, you took a kind of a extended course to get to where you are now. So what would be the fastest way to getting involved in forensic accounting these days?
Really, I think it's just wherever you are looking for ways to serve people this way. These problems come up whether you're an accountant working at a CPA firm, if you're a bookkeeper, there's really a whole lot of different ways that you can serve people. If you're a private investigator, start looking to serve your clients in this way. What are the best evidence sources? I think sometimes the overwhelming part is that all of these, all of these like problems and concerns come in from clients and you don't know where to start if you've never done it before. And so one thing that we do offer, we kind of put it on pause during quarantine, but we do offer something called Be a Data Sleuth seminars. And let's start with what do you do when a client comes in with concerns? Let's turn their case drama into a case plan. That's what the first session is about. Then let's talk about best data sources and data analytics and how to work a case. We talk about money laundering and tracing and finding assets. And then we wrap up with the investigation game where you get to actually do hands-on experience and practice. So I know that, and my colleague and I that put this training together, I know that both of us would have been very excited to have had this type of hands-on and just guidance, like here's where you start whenever we first started in this field.
Yeah. We had a follow-up question on forensic accounting. Not sure if you don't have any experience, fine. Just wanted to check in. Have you ever used voice recognition in fraud detection, especially in forensic accounting?
I have not.
Question from Melly. No. Okay. Well, Melly, if you do have experience there, feel free to comment. I do not have any experience there myself either, but I think it's great that the question was asked and it could lead to further discussion afterwards. I have a couple more questions. I know we passed the 20-minute mark. As long as we stay under 30, I think we're good, right? That's what we planned on.
Yeah.
One of your specialties is investigating potential payroll fraud.
Yes.
What are some payroll fraud schemes that business owners should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of answer that a little differently. Schemes help us wrap our minds around what action somebody would take in order to get money out of the company. But really, remembering a list of schemes and what they look like, that's just a lot for a business owner. So what I like to talk about is let's look at the payroll reports and let's look at what people are being paid on a gross, like on gross pay. We actually have something on our website that's our payroll data analytics tool that you can actually graph your payroll just as often as you want and look for outliers. That's one of the best ways to detect that, because ultimately the scheme tells us how it happened. That's how you prosecute a case. That's how you work a case. You're looking for intent and benefit, but really to detect it, you're looking for anomalies. So if you can go look at where could someone be taking money out of my company through payroll, how could they do this? And you're going to find that in the anomalies of the actual payroll data. I like to say that journal entries don't cash at the casino. You have to have cash to go play at the casino. So if you can think about, sure, inflating time or a ghost employee or whatever, but really, if you look at your data and look for the anomalies, that's how you detect it.
Okay. So that's the detection side. Is there anything from the prevention side that can be done to prevent payroll fraud from even occurring in the first place?
So obviously, if you can separate what people are handling, don't let just one person handle payroll. So I have someone who preps, who downloads all the time, and then I have someone who puts that into our payroll system, but then I review it on its way out. So that's 3 different people looking at it. I listened to your interview with Matt Christensen a while back, and he is so strong on the prevention side related to cyber. Whenever it comes to financial stuff, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but I really don't think we can prevent 100% of the fraud. I think that it's really in detection. And if we can just detect it quickly, That's what we try to empower people to do. Just catch it when it first starts happening and nip it in the bud and then move on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We had another question come in from Stanley. COVID-19 has a significant impact on many small businesses. Do you foresee any new accounting scams as a result of the crisis? Just like for me, for example, I recently wrote an article. A lot of the things we're seeing, a lot of the vulnerabilities that we're seeing, small companies or even larger companies have been the same as pre-COVID. They're just being exposed now. But I can't speak for the accounting side. Maybe you have some insights there.
Yeah, so I am of the opinion that there are no like new scams, really, like that everything ultimately is just a way to disguise getting money out of a business or money out of investors. And so what I think we're probably going to see, and kind of what you mentioned is actually applicable to the accounting stuff too, is that I think that there are companies who had lots of cash flow, they were doing really well. And once they had to kind of start looking at their budget, they're going to detect more fraud now than they did maybe when the cash was just, right. Best economy, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so then there's also this other thing of because the stock market is down, I do think that we're going to be surprised by the companies who commit fraud to stay afloat during this time. Okay. I do think that we're going to see more of that. Okay.
So I have a final question for you. You're a certified fraud examiner. We see that in the background there, the certificate, hanging proud. You have over 10 years of experience. You mentioned your company, right? It's been going on for 10 years in the fraud fighting space. And I'm sure you're keeping up with the bigger fraud picture. On LinkedIn, you're very active, engaging in conversations. So I'd like to end the interview, unless some other questions come in from the audience. I'd like to end the interview with your take on, let's say, the top 3 fraud schemes that, let's say, small businesses should be keeping an eye out for right now, or even at the individual level, just the top 3 schemes that are hitting right now.
Yeah, I think that you asking about payroll fraud schemes, that's going to be really important. To monitor as a small business owner, especially while people are working remotely. So really paying attention to their time. There's tools out there that can that you can have running to identify, when your employees are logged on, what they're doing, stuff like that. It feels a little big brother, I know, but creating some sort of accountability to double check your payroll. The another thing is, as a small business, this happened to me the other day, just knowing what to do if you have a fake unemployment claim filed under your business. And in the state of Oklahoma, I got one the other day for like a Joe Smith or something. I mean, and Joe Smith had never worked for me before. And so in Oklahoma, we have an email that we email and they'll take care of it. So just making sure that we report those. And then also just making sure to look at your bank statements and credit card statements every month, because during this time when cash is tight, that's when things can kind of be exposed. And it's not a time where you want to be fighting that, fighting employees stealing money out of reimbursements or something like that. So identify that by looking at credit card statements and bank statements.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks for those insights. Another comment came in. Thanks for the always great content. People enjoyed this episode, and I have to thank you for all of your insights. I saw on the Workman Forensics page that you do have an upcoming investigation game. Are there still spots available, or
we do have spots available. It's on Monday at 10 a.m. Central Time. And if you want to just send me a message on LinkedIn, then I'll get you connected with Alicia and she can get you signed up if you'd like to play. We're it's
Can you get into any just a brief background of what's going to be discussed in this one? There's different games, right?
Right now it's just the case of the man cave.
The case of the man cave. Okay.
Case of the man cave.
All right.
and it's what we talked about earlier, and it's a lot of fun. But we do have a few extra just free seats available. So
Okay.
like the first probably 5 people that just contact me, we'll send you a coupon code and you can sign up. And it's all, digital, of course.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Thanks again for your time, and don't hang up. I'm going to end the broadcast, but we'll just have a brief chat afterwards. And
Sure.
yeah,
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
yeah. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.